Welcome to Dare, the show for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders who dare to shape the future. Your hosts today are Ned Hayes and Cecilia Mariani. Dare is brought to you by Darwaf, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. The Dare podcast is happy to welcome John Harkness to the show today. John is the founder and CEO of Rewire AI, a startup that uses artificial intelligence to help scientists better understand and use biomedical images. John also holds a PhD in neuroscience from Oregon Health and Science University, and he previously worked as a research scientist at Washington State. So we're looking forward to hearing his perspective on how AI can make the scientific process more efficient. I think John dares to improve healthcare outcomes.
Well, Ned, Cecilia, thanks so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here.
Well, welcome to the show, John. Could you tell us about Rewire AI and give us a pitch for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rewire is an AI as a software platform for biomedical image analysis, which means we spend a lot of time looking at tissue samples, cells, biomarkers, the types of indications of disease that, we're looking at in drug development, or, a clinician is potentially looking at to diagnose a disease. And the reason that we're doing that is primarily to help these decision makers better quantify those indicators of disease in order to either choose the right outcome or develop that drug. It's kind of one of these problems. I like to equate it to trying to count all the stars in the sky. So, this is one of those things where we can all look up, we can all see the sky, and, unless there's a whole lot of clouds, you can pretty much see everything that's visible. But the idea that you would go count all of these stars is, pretty obviously something that's out of the scope of humans. So this is, really similar to a lot of the challenges that our users are facing, trying to detect each one of those targets and make the right decision based on that quantification.
So you also changed your name as a company from Rewire Neuro to Rewire AI. And so did the company change focus, or what changed there?
Yeah, that's kind of a funny story. We made that change, I guess, just about a year ago. And it really leans into, what our focus is. We started out, as this company on this mission to improve the accuracy and reproducibility of this type of image analysis. And, that came from some of the work that I was doing as a scientist. So it started out, in this neuro realm. A lot of what we were looking at were, tissue samples coming from brains. And so Rewire Neuro made sense for us. But as we developed as a company, we really expanded from that. We started working with a lot of customers that, had nothing to do with neurotissue. We did some, fertility analysis. We started working with hepatocytes and liver samples and everything else. And so realized that our core, that what we're fundamentally bringing to the equation was our AI. So rebranded as Rewire AI. And it turns out that all other startups did that exact same thing at the exact same time. So, it's a little bit funny now. We've been around long enough that we've kind of seen a couple waves of AI. When we started, everyone accused us of being elf in the box. Everyone's saying, okay, well, you're not really AI. You have somebody, down there pushing the buttons. And well, no, that's not, we're actually AI. And now we've come around to the point where everyone accuses us of being like a ChatGPT skin or something like that. And like, well, no, we're not that either. We're actually our own system. So, it's I think a neat time to just see the field of AI evolving and where everyone's taking it.
Yes, so thank you. So your company is very young, founded in 2019. Then in 2021, you won the Oregon Entrepreneur Network pitch contest. Did you expect to win that pitch competition?
I definitely did not expect to win. That was my, first, I think, big win in a pitch competition. And so we, it was all on Zoom at that point, right? Because this was right in the middle of COVID. And, they announced the winner, and it kind of had that moment of like, did they say my name? Was that us? That was a great experience, but was kind of one of those moments of learning, just the power or the impact that these types of early stage pitch competitions can have. We had been doing those for a while, and I think we had actually participated in that exact pitch competition a couple of years. And each time you do that, you learn how to hone your deck, you learn how to tell your story a little bit better. but you're also getting out in front of the investors. Even if you're not first place, everybody sees you to some extent, and that sort of visibility I think is really important for early stage startups. Maybe not what we always talk about is the reason for doing these pitch competitions, but definitely one of the good outcomes of it. So yeah, we started back then. I guess we got going right before COVID started, which turns out a fantastic time to start a startup. We had plans to go get some office space. We were going to do the full startup thing, and like everything started shutting down, and we kind of had this internal conversation of like, well, let's wait. We'll wait until next month. This is all going to open up next month, and then we'll go get an office. And of course, it didn't. So we really dodged a bullet, there early on. Like, fortunately, we didn't sign a lease and we didn't get stuck in anything. And so, just about a year and a half ago, we finally picked up, our first office space. Now we've got, a really good place for our team to get together and work. And that's kind of helped us, take some of our early learnings and like working on Slack and Zoom. And now we are able to work in person on top of that. So, it's been a good transition and a good period of growth for us.
Are you still growing as a company? How big is this company now?
Yeah, so we're up to about 10 people, and that we've got a number of full-time employees. We've got some interns that tend to come in during the summer and things like that. But it's really turned into just this like good dynamic of people who I think are really excited about what we're doing. Because we've got, I think, a really neat technology, and we have, I think, a very compelling application for it. Because ultimately, this has a big impact on human health and people's livelihood or people's well-being, and that's very rewarding to work on.
Absolutely, yeah. It must be great to know that you're making a difference in people's lives, and in fact, you have customers who agree. So OHSU, Legacy Health, other people are using your products. So what's the customer journey like? How do they get your product, and how does this make a difference in people's lives?
Yeah, that's probably one of the most rewarding parts of this job. We've grown to customers in a number of different areas. We've got a lot of academic researchers using some of our software interface that we've got a couple thousand users on that platform who have collectively cited some of our initial work, I think over 70 times now. I was just looking this up a minute ago. So this is one of those moments of just seeing how much further users can take technology, than I could when I was a researcher. So really neat impacts, really cool to see what they're doing. I had a nice conversation with one grad student a few months back, and they were saying that they wouldn't have been able to finish their PhD without the use of our software. Yeah, it's one of those really nice moments of just like, gosh, this is cool to see, how it can impact people. But yeah, so we have users, I think, on every continent except for Antarctica, which is a nice feather in our cap, and they're doing just really powerful things with our AI stuff that we hadn't initially considered. So all areas of biomedical research now, but then what our primary focus has been over the last couple of years is integration of those AI systems into partnering medical devices. And essentially the reason for this is because when labs are done or when tissue samples are read by diagnostic devices, these devices need to quantify images the same way that those researchers do, or pathologists do, or histologists do. But they often rely on kind of outdated algorithms that are making poor decisions based off that. And so the really good example I think we have for that is one of the devices that we've worked with is able to quantify liquid biopsy samples. And, this is the sort of technology where, like, let's say I'm going in to have a test done and they take this sample. Well, if the device reads that sample and makes a bad decision, they're going to come back and just, John, I'm sorry, you've got 2 weeks to live. The test was done and, we found out that you've got, this condition, and that can, have a huge impact on me. Fortunately, what we're able to do is improve that accuracy to the point where that bad decision, that bad read might have not come back to me as the patient. So we can help more accurately detect the biomarkers that these devices are meant to detect, return that result back faster, and ultimately lead to a better outcome.
Yeah, so the field of computer vision has also truly accelerated over the past few years. You mentioned that new devices is also accelerating your innovation, but the new technology innovations in that field creates new opportunities for your team? Or can you mention some of these new opportunities that new technology is creating?
Yeah, so this is kind of one of those big moments for us as a company where I think we realized where the technology can go and where we were missing the boat initially. So when Rewire first released its software, we had developed a number of computer vision models that were based on these deep learning algorithms. So deep convolutional neural nets that are really good at accurately detecting the biomarkers and cells that we design them to detect. Especially in scenarios where you might have multiple cells overlapping, or you're trying to classify, let's say, a cancer cell versus a non-cancerous cell, things like that. The problem with these models is that when a user tries to apply that model to any sort of data, in our case, it's always image data, but data that's outside of what it's been trained for, we end up with an out of data distribution problem. And so, this ultimately means that the model doesn't perform very well. A good example for it is if I train you a model that's meant to detect dogs and you start showing me pictures of cats, well, we might be able to detect some cats that look a little bit like dogs, but ultimately this probably isn't going to perform as well as you want it to. And so that's what happened with our very earliest customers. They started using some of our models and came back to me and said, John, this really isn't doing what you said it would do. It's not detecting the cells as well as I wanted it to. Which was a little bit of a surprise and a little bit of a shock. We just said, well, no, it works really well in our hands. So what we had to develop was a way for our model to learn from what our users were showing it. So if I train it to pick up cancer cells and I pick up lung cancer and they start showing me a different type of cancer, well, then we need to be able to learn from what the user is telling us and then provide that feedback going forward, or provide that detection going forward. So our system that we ended up patenting, we're calling our AutoML system. It allows a user to start off with some of our foundational AI, use that for an initial read of their images, and then provide just a very small amount of feedback. So rather than the hundreds of thousands of training objects that you would need to train a model initially, we're only asking for about 5 images of feedback from our user. And that's enough for us to then fine tune a model to be more specific for them and then automatically deploy that model back to them. So for our academic users, our research users, that means they're using our interface and all of a sudden, they've got a new model available for them that, is better at detecting that target. For our device integrator or our diagnostic device partners, that means that their end user is able to experience what they had bought the device for. They're getting the accuracy of detection that they intended without needing to ask the manufacturer to change something or wait for an update. It's just all of a sudden going to perform the way that they had intended it to. So that was kind of our big step forward in technology. And, a couple of years ago, that was pretty cutting edge. What we're looking at now and where I think we're going to see AI as a field going, especially in the biomedical space, is to start utilizing some of what transformer models and large language models are capable of doing for us. So, I think we've probably all heard of ChatGPT and this type of large language model. Well, these are all based off of a technology called transformers that are extremely good at learning context and relationship of the data set that's been trained into it, and then predicting the next most likely word or letter to come out of it. So in the case of a chatbot, this is great at explaining a Wikipedia article to you, I guess, or having a conversation with you on a website. What we see this technology being useful for is incorporating larger amounts of information or knowledge into some of the detection models that we're currently using. So, imagine a scenario where not only do we have a computer vision model that's able to read an image like a pathologist would, but also has some of the background and training that pathologist had. So now this model understands some context of what a cell is and why we're looking for a cell and how a cell might differentiate from background or from debris or an offsite target. So, that capability, that future, I think, is where we start to see AI fulfill maybe the promise of what we've, hoped it to be, where, our bots, our tools are smart enough to fill in gaps in our logic and make assumptions that we're making when we interact with them. So if I tell it to go find all the cancer cells, it might know enough to understand what I'm telling it to do.
And can you talk about how this makes a difference to everyday people? If I am just an average person, not a scientist, how will Rewire AI make my life better?
Yeah, so I think this really goes back to kind of that story I was telling about, walking into your doctor's office and receiving an incorrect diagnosis. One of the biggest challenges that I think we have with some of the automation tools currently, ranging all the way from image analysis to automatic, autonomous cars and chatbots, is when data sets, or I'm sorry, when models are producing bad results, when large language models are hallucinating, when a computer vision model is performing poorly. So those are scenarios where I think we've understood how AI can benefit us, but have executed that poorly. So we're gonna, the future that we're building at Rewire, and where I think the field of AI is going, is that these models will start to become better and better and better, and reach that promise of really helping improve a diagnosis or build a drug faster with fewer offsite targets or fewer side effects. A really good example of that is a side project that we're working on with one of our collaborators back at Washington State University, Ali Coffin. So this project is designed at reducing ototoxic drug effects of prescription drugs that are out and being taken by people right now. So Ali's research is looking at how a number of drugs like gentamicin and drugs in that class produce or cause hearing loss because they're killing inner ear hair cells. So just like with the hearing loss you experience from loud noises going to a concert, these hair cells die, they're not being regenerated, they don't come back. And so in scenarios where somebody's having this effect from taking a drug, it's really kind of unfortunate. This isn't something that needs to happen, and a lot of times we're not even testing for that. So some of the ototoxic effects of these drugs like gentamicin were only discovered when patients started reporting hearing loss. In patient populations, that's also hard to detect sometimes, because if you're working with an aging population, it's not always totally clear that they're experiencing hearing loss from this drug rather than just from age. So we're working with Ali to develop predictive models to screen for this in novel compounds, and this has the potential of speeding up drug development because we're able to test for one more side effect, but having a huge impact on patients. Losing your hearing is a life-altering condition, and if we can prevent even just that, the way that we screen for hepatotoxicity or cardiotoxicity, then that has a huge impact on people. So that's where I see the types of AIs that we're developing really benefiting humans. I think we are, for even as far as we are into AI and how much we've started to rely on it for writing our term papers and stuff like that, I think we're only starting to see the tip of the iceberg.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. I think the field of AI is just expanding every day. We're seeing new developments. I'd love to come back to you, John, for a second. How did you personally get into this? Why do you want to solve this very specific problem? What makes you passionate about it?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. So I guess where I got going on this was as a postdoc working at Washington State University. I was working with a person there named Barb Sorg, and our research was really focused on understanding neuroplasticity in the brain, which we think is regulated by a structure called a perineural net. One of the great ways to think of this is essentially like a scaffolding around a building. So these perineural nets provide some structure around neurons. They help regulate the synaptic connections that these neurons are making with their neighbors. And, that ultimately impacts learning and memory. And, my specific focus on that was looking at drug addiction and how these structures might, impact development and maintenance of an addiction. So that research all meant that we were doing a lot of image analysis. My research would always, look at some behavioral aspects, and then we'd take a look at the brain tissue underlying that, which, as you can imagine, meant that I was spending a lot of late nights looking at cells from a microscope image and trying to count them, circle them, which was all done by hand. So that was kind of a frustrating task for me. What the story that I remember from this that always kind of makes me chuckle is when I started working with Barb. She had a grad student that was just finishing up, and Barb wanted me to go back and reproduce some of the data that grad student had done, which is really typical in science. We always want to replicate results, and so Barb asked me to reanalyze all of the images that the grad student had generated, and I kind of thought, I don't get paid enough for this. I don't want to do that. And so that was kind of the moment that I started, looking at a way to build out some tools. Early on, we were using a program called ImageJ that's built by NIH, the National Institutes of Health, to do that analysis. And so I used ImageJ to build some of my automation. From there, Washington State University provided a number of startup grants for us to help roll this technology out. It's just a really cool mechanism because, one, as a researcher, it helped me understand the potential for my technology in other people's hands and how I might go about commercializing that. But two, it helped me, as an early scientist, kind of build my career trajectory. I think a lot of researchers, a lot of postdocs, are kind of often go down that road of applying for, K-99 grants or something like that from NIH, and then eventually getting, an R01 type grants and finding a tenure track position. Well, this introduced me to a career path that I really hadn't understood or, even thought about, where I can work on stuff that I'm really passionate about in this area and find, ways to bring that to people more broadly than I would as a scientist. So those startup funds led to some preliminary data generation. We applied for some SBIR grant funding from NIH, which was a moment for me where I could then essentially start my own research path, my own lab in a sense. So we had a phase 1 grant that funded us kind of through that early stage in 2019, 2020, until we received our phase 2 grant. And that's when, the commercialization engine really clicked into gear. And we were able to start finding partnerships, working with, some really amazing companies to start implementing our AI into their products and their services. And that, is really kind of when things took off. We, expanded our team from 3 people to 10 people and, are now, I think, enjoying kind of the fruits of that early effort.
Great.
Well, Rewire AI states that you contribute to ethical AI. What kind of contributions do you make to helping AI to be more ethical?
I love that question because I think one of the real challenges with developing AI, especially in biomedical applications, is that we often are introducing a lot of bias that we don't intend to. And I think you had Lloyd Fovey on last week, which is a very hard act to follow because Lloyd is just an incredible person in the space, and he talked a lot about the implications of building AI systems in healthcare and helping patients manage their experience through a hospital, but then also what that can mean when AI is making the wrong choices or telling us the wrong things. And so that sort of potential for bias also shows up in what we're doing when our models, or not our when computer vision models are developed off of biased data sets. We might start to make or have unintended consequences that we didn't even consider. A good example of this that I think has been in the media is where, these systems go awry in hiring processes. So if I'm a company that's, trying to hire, new software engineers, and I'm training the model based off of the resume of all my current software engineers. Well, any sort of bias that I've had in my hiring process, whether it's because, we didn't do a good job of, hiring both, people from different parts of the world or with different backgrounds or different genders, these sorts of things that we might not be aware of certainly show up in those models. And then we start hiring people that just fit that mold. So when we train our computer vision models, we want to make sure that we're not introducing those unintended biases. And that's where our ability to adapt adapt our computer vision to that specific user's.
Yeah, so I know you talked about some of the scary implications. People talk about robot doctors. So why are robot doctors a bad idea, John?
Well, I think that dystopian future that we can all imagine, where robot doctors are, displacing doctors and making bad decisions, and cutting pathologists or something like that out of the loop, is a little bit frightening. But I think we create some of the worst possible outcomes when we imagine, these sci-fi scenarios. The future that I think we see at Rewire, certainly, what I imagine, the 10-year out scenario being, is where we've really built a world where AI is augmenting our capabilities as humans and helping us go past the limitations that we have. So in our scenario at Rewire, helping a user go past an attention span limitation or sensitivity, to a detection limitation. I don't think we're gonna replace people. I think we're gonna make people better. We've seen that in a number of examples of computers and software, and how it's expanded industries. One of the good examples I like to use, is the introduction of accounting software to CPAs. I think, initially when some of the stuff started coming out, everyone was afraid that we were just going to eliminate the CPA position, that we'd all just be, working with TurboTax exclusively. But actually, what happened was it made it possible for CPAs and accountants to do more and to do it more efficiently. So rather than reducing jobs, it increased jobs. And now we have, more people in these types of positions than, we ever have before per capita. So, that's a good example of where software improves our ability. A really straightforward example of that is, maybe just how all the automation in our cars is now reducing accidents. Even if you're not talking about full self-driving cars, having a car that's able to detect the one in front of you braking improves our reaction time and makes it less likely that you're going to rear end them. So, those types of benefits of AI, I think, are what we're really going to see. And that's what I'm excited for. That's going to really improve the state of healthcare.
Yes, thanks for the insight, John. So here's a big question. What's the future of AI? Where do you see AI going in 5 to 10 years?
I think that we're moving towards a future where we can really build out that, I don't want to use the term artificial general intelligence, or general artificial intelligence. This is one of those terms that I think it's thrown around a lot. Going back to the robot doctors question, I think, it's a little bit scary. But what we will undoubtedly start to see are models that are able to pull from broader contexts of training with deeper understanding, better knowledge, that help us make better decisions. So I talked a little bit about transformers and how I think that can do that in our space, even in vision, where we're starting to incorporate vision with context and knowledge. But that's also then going to enable a future where I think we start to interact with computers differently. One of my favorite speakers is a guy named Nick Frost. He's the CEO of Cohere, and Nick came out of Jeffrey Hinton's lab, which was one of the labs that first developed these transformer models and first published it. And so, one of the things that I love hearing Nick talk about is where these models will become available. So right now, when we interact with large language models, it's probably because we're going to, a website and you're working with a little chat box and you're asking it questions. But that's pretty limited. For the most part, when I'm clicking through my computer, when I'm doing tasks during the day, I'm not working with large language models or transformers at all. So, I think there's a point where our interaction with computers becomes really based around conversation, where rather than having to search for something, or even having to go pull up a spreadsheet and look for a particular equation and think about the how to write that equation, I might just start talking with my computer and say, hey, I need to pull up my 5-year forecast and I want to add in this data set and tweak this equation, and what does that tell me? So when we're able to make our interactions more conversational, I think it makes humans better at what we do, right? We like to interact in these ways, and that's going to be a real transformative moment. We're going to start being more efficient. We're going to start building tools that are capable of doing more powerful things, and I'm excited for that. I think that's going to be a really neat application, and I guess a really good future point for AI.
Yeah, so and we have our final important question. Our podcast is about people who dare to dream. So what do you dare to dream, John? What future do you dare to imagine you are creating?
I am so excited for that future where AI is helping us in ways that are positive and improving our human condition. Right now, as these technologies become more prevalent, there's, I think a lot of fear that can arise from how they're changing the ways that we work and the types of jobs that we do. But it's ultimately, I think, the democratization of AI that will really allow these technologies to be used in positive ways. Right now we see all the, scary things, all the, deep fakes that are made and stuff like that. And I like to think that this is just a very small subset of applications of AI. And ultimately, just as, software and computers have become so prevalent and so useful, I think AI will be just that. So, one of the things that we're doing that I think is daring as a startup is that we're really working to democratize that. It's difficult for people, it's difficult for companies to generate some of these models that can be extremely powerful in what they do and really beneficial to humans, to human health. And so, by building tools that help our customers, our users, apply this technology in ways that we haven't imagined, it's going to go further than we could have taken it. Just like what I was talking about with that early research I was doing. I didn't realize how far our software could go. And now seeing what people are publishing with it, seeing the ways that it's changing the field of, biomedicine is really rewarding. So, I'm excited for that future. I'm excited to see what people can do with our technology and our software that goes beyond, my abilities or my imagination. But then I'm really excited to embrace AI in ways that augment our capabilities in general. It's going to take, a number of years, I think, to really see that come together. We're, seeing it already have big impacts in a number of fields. And when we get there, I think we're all going to be better off because of it.
That's a great vision. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks to our guests today for their great insights on DARE, the podcast for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders. If you'd like your story to be featured on DARE, just contact us at info@darwaft.com. DARE is brought to you by Darwaft, the tech team that can make your vision a reality.